Good afternoon or good morning if you're across the pond as I am. My name is Jeremy Nelson. I am from the University of Michigan in the United States. I'm excited to welcome you all to the Media and Learning Association's webinar on how can gamification support meaningful learning in higher education. Just a couple housekeeping rules. Please be sure to mute your mic and have your camera on. This event is being recorded. If you have any comments or questions throughout the presentations today, feel free to put them in the chat, and we'll have some time at the end to go through Q&A. If you can update or say hello or where you're from in the chat, if you want to change your name and the institute as well on your profile, that'd be great. And these presentations and recordings will be shared. We had a quick poll. If you have a chance to go through that, if not, you can find it under the More button. Our polls and quizzes there at the bottom. But I'm very excited to moderate this session today that really explores how simple, adaptable methods such as role play, scenario-based learning, and enigma or challenge-based activities can be integrated into teaching practice to foster engagement and deeper understanding. So we have three great speakers today that we're going to hear from, and then we'll have time for Q&A. So we have Ivan Bonilla from the Universitat Autónoma de Barcelona, Yane Lanaciti from Oulu University of Applied Sciences, and Julian van der Kratz from Leiden University. I will turn it over to Ivan to get us started.
Hi, thanks a lot, Jeremy. I'm going to share the presentation. You can see it. I hope so. Yeah. So, well, good morning, good afternoon to everyone. So I'm going to start with a simple and slide presentation of how psychology and gamification can help in a meaningful learning in higher education. The main idea is just to give us a little bit of our experience and using gamification in our teaching day by day. So our background is from the psychology faculty and also the sports science faculty. So, well, everyone welcome to learn everything and open to any questions. So for us, we usually use the ECAP hierarchy when we are talking about gamification, because what research says is that right now, the question about gamification is not about if it's fun, because usually we misunderstood, no, at least here in Spain, we misunderstood that gamification is to being fun or funny when we are doing a teaching or university teaching. But what we are talking about is not about if it's fun, it's more about if it does or it requires students to think, explain, and reflect. So for us, it's more about that, more than if we are playing a game or not. Usually, we have 4 levels of what are we talking about gamification, and we have a first level that it's about if it's a passive student, a student that is just engaged in a game. Not I'm preparing a lesson with a little games, so the student is just engaging the game, so it's passive. He doesn't need to do anything. He's just playing. For example, when we are doing a Kahoot, when we are when we are using gamification with a Kahoot, where the student can answer a question we are giving to him or a reflection, for our point of view, is more a passive student because he's not about thinking or explaining or reflecting and anything. He's just answering a question, so he's more a passive student. We have a second level about our gamification, that is the active student. That is a student who is engaging our games, who is playing, who is actively doing something in the classroom. But for us, the important levels of gamification is when we are doing a constructive or an interactive lesson. It's not only about doing a game, it's more about doing a constructive or interactive lesson. What are we talking about constructive? Constructive is about that maybe we are giving them a game where there's not a clear end or a clear final situation or a final reflection. It's more about what our students construct, what our students learn, and finally we have a final solution. Usually we work with that kind of ideas, the constructive way, when we are making, for example, a little game where the student has to choose different options, and between the different options, they are going to have a different end depending on the ethical approach, depending on which psychological area or branch they prefer to work on depending on which training they prefer to use on their future athletes or their future patients. So this is what we talk about constructive. And our final, that if I tell you the truth, we don't have arrived yet to this level, is the interactive one, that maybe technology is more involved on, where the student is not only constructing what we are giving to them, it's more about how they interact directly with the lesson or the subject. It's more about that maybe I don't know what I'm going to teach today, because it depends on the interaction with my students. So maybe I'm just giving them a problem, or I'm just giving them a solution or a future solution or a future need. For example, how we can make an online intervention with swimmers, and they have to interact with me, interact with the different materials of the lesson, interact with the different approaches I have, and I gamify all their pathway until they arrive to a final solution or a final project. Maybe it's a different way of doing university teaching, at least here in Spain. So we don't have arrived yet to this level. We are aspiring to arrive to it, but at least right now we're in the constructive part. If we move to the part of the evidence base, because we are moving with different evidence base, all the scientific meta-analysis says that it's true that gamification has a positive impact, but the key part of the positive impact is not about if we are gamifying or not, is more if we are giving sense to the gamification, if we are giving some action, if we are giving something that it's cognitive motivational. So what we have said is that what we have seen is that we have a moderate impact on the cognitive, motivational, behavioral, and academic performance with all the gamification tools we have right now. So it's true that gamification helps, but the success, it doesn't depend on using or not gamification. It's more if we are using gamification with social interaction and a game that is integrated in their day by day as students, as humans, and also if it's integrated with the teacher. So it's not an isolated reward mechanic that, at least here in Spain, is what we have right now. When we are talking about gamification, we usually have just reward mechanics. If you arrive to this level or in the lecture, you are going to receive an extra points on your final mark. Today we're going to make a game where different teams, they are going to compete, and finally the best team is going to receive an extra mark, or it's going to receive an extra point for their next day. So we are more in the level of isolated reward mechanics, and what literature says and our experience says is more about the social interaction and the game design. So it's quite complicated to think like that, because it's not about thinking about rewards. It's about thinking about more, for us as psychologists, it's more difficult because it's to think more about like a software engineers that they are doing a game. It's not just as a psychologist of stimulus reward. It's more about how I design a game that is significant and has some social interaction. If we move to the formats, usually there are some classical formats, but the three key formats that right now we are using, and also science says that are the more effective, are the role play ones that usually they encourage the perspective taking and cognitive the refusal, and it's usually because it's linked to higher critical thinking and teamwork. So role play is one of the ways of gamification, of how we can gamify university. Then we have the scenario-based gamification that provides a safe, realistic context for judgment, and students can apply theory under uncertainty to reach theory and practice. These are the most common that we are using right now, because for us it's the easiest one, because it's quite easy for us to make a scenario where the students has to make a bridge between what we say in theory and what they are facing on practice. Right now, we are doing gamified realistic scenarios. That means that we have some actors that they're playing part of the scenario. So we are not only gamifying their experience with fake scenarios or with a fake role playing between the students. No, we are hiring professional actors to come there to play as a professional athlete, to play as a possible clinic patient. So we are working more in that area of a scenario of real semi-realistic scenario-based gamification lessons. And finally, we have the enigmas and challenge. We would like to rise to that point, but it's true that for us it's quite difficult to motivate the students and to know which kind of enigmas or challenges they prefer or they feel comfortable in a university level. Because usually they are more interested in another kind of topics more than personality or than sports psychology. So this is something we are still working on. So from our experience, from these three scenarios, the top one is the scenario based for the part of the gamification. And if we arrive, it's a short communication. If we arrive to the end, um, for us, the message we want to tell to our colleagues that are here in the in this Zoom meeting, this webinar, is that it's important to think about the outcome, what we want to get, what is our main idea we want to achieve, what learning goal we want to learn or we want to get involved our students better than the design. Because usually we spend a lot of time on the design of the game or the gamified lesson, and we are not thinking enough if this design matches with the outcome we want to arrive on. So for us, the main full gamification is not about the overall structure of the experience. It's more about it's about the combination between what we need what we need to learn, what we want to achieve, and how we can motivate them through a gamification design. And of course, as psychologists, we always talk about the psychological needs. So for us, an effective design always have in account the autonomy, the competence, and the relationship between our students. So finally, some fast conclusions from this 10 minutes presentation is that the gamification is a fundamental way of structuring students' participation. It's not just a decorative layer or something we say we do in our teaching lessons. And there's a lot of people who says we gamify our lessons, but or our subjects. And well, I don't know if it's a gamification or it's just about doing games or about doing different objectives. Finally, usually the small changes, it's a better impact than a super impact. Our experience says that we try to make super changes from the whole subject or the whole degrees, and we try to shift them to be gamified. We don't have a good experience about that because usually we need time for learn, time for make mistakes. So usually little by little steps, it's better. And finally, we thought that if our students just leave the class having only completed a game, it's a failure. For us, is that if they leave being having connected ideas, so then gamification has done a meaningful work. So for us, is that gamification, and that's just a little and short presentation of our main topics and our research that we are doing on gamification. So thanks a lot. Open for any question or for anything you need.
Thank you, Ivan. Well, if you have questions, please put them in the chat and we'll have time at the end of the presentations for that. So thank you very much. Very interesting. Next up, we have Yane Lansite talking about games, gamification, and serious playfulness in higher education. Yane.
Thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
think you should see it. All I'm missing is my controls. Here we go. So good afternoon, everybody. And I'm happy to follow Ivan, so I don't have to explain any of the psychological side of the games, gamification, and serious playfulness. And perhaps I can go quite quickly to the case examples that I had prepared. I work as a teacher educator in the School of Professional Teacher Education, and my students' average age is plus minus 40 years old. So they're not average university, young adult university students, but they come from different professional backgrounds and they're only doing their pedagogical studies. And then they will end up teaching in university or vocational college and so forth. So sometimes games, playing, and everything that relates to something a child might do is not the most popular way of studying. Myself, I'm enthusiastic gamer. I've always loved outdoor games, computer games, theater games, basketball. I still coach youth basketball. I still play console and computer games. I still do improv theater, and for me, it's difficult to understand that who wouldn't love that. So it has been a goal and a challenge to take that into adult education process. I have a background as a drama teacher, so obviously concepts like serious playfulness and the whole Homo ludens idea of playful humans is very important. That in drama and in theater, it's very natural to create scenarios where you're role playing or you're playing a story or you're playing an acting. And it's natural to build the learning experience through games, plays, and being a playful. But it's not so simple, especially when it comes to university studies and especially when it comes to teaching people from different backgrounds. And obviously, it's not a new thing. The whole thing with playing with serious issues, it comes all the way from a ancient Greek tradition. We've always had that in us, in humanity, that we take a serious topic and we play with it. We make fun out of it. So it's also a very natural way for us to deal with serious topics and put it in the playful format. And for educational scientists, it's always easy to pull up a classic John Dewey and say that, okay, the playing is also evident there, that playing is very often brought up as a very important way to learn and educate, not just for children, but for any age learners. So for the past 15 years, I've been, unfortunately, mostly an online teacher. And having a background as a communications and drama teacher who started my university teacher's career teaching in workshops and classrooms and studios, I felt the limitation of online teaching very heavily. And I've always struggled to make that more online learning experience more lively and more playful and more gamified. But still the same attitude that you often see, that at least sometimes you see it with adults, that they relate all this playful stuff with something that kids do. And it's not easy to start playing because quite often many adults have forgotten how it feels to start the play just like that. So they need much more breaking the ice and they need much more motivation and justification that why do we do this in the format of a game or play. So AI has been a huge help in the past couple of years because obviously for me, I love using games, plays, gamified scenarios as a teaching tool. And it's much more fun for me as well to do my job that way. I feel like that tradition of talking head of lecturing presentations and then having some group discussion in the end of our online webinar, it feels like that format, it's repeating itself so much that I really need to have something else just for my own teaching sake, but hopefully also for the students and participants. And in the past years, we've also seen the need for those AI ready or future proof learning solutions that we feel like some things are way too easy to complete with the help of AI. So we need to create something that is immersive on its own merit, and it creates meaningful learning experiences just by being part of that game or play or any kind of playful scenario. So that's really something that is an ongoing challenge for us to create in an online learning setting. A lot of the things I will show next did not work out fine. Some were just projects or case examples that taught us something, but I'm happy to be in an environment where I'm allowed to try different kind of ways to teach future teachers, and sometimes fail, do mistakes, and realize that, okay, this kind of thing we tried to do online did not work, so we will not do it next year, or we have to completely change it. But I always try to bring something new to each new cohort, or every year we try something different. So hopefully we are not stuck in our own ways year after year. So I won't be telling too much about this because I have told about Educational Video Challenge Edit quite many times in media and learning occasions, but this is something that is still ongoing. We've had this running for a little bit over 10 years. So it's a hackathon style competition of universities around Europe creating educational videos in a hackathon style limited time format. So it is a competition like hackathons are, but it's not very serious competition. But that element of competition nevertheless feels meaningful, that there are several teams around Europe making educational videos in that same time frame, and then the winner gets the prize and so forth. So that is still ongoing. Actually, it will happen next semester as well. We've used online digital badge of competence for quite a few years, and we started the thing with the competition. We had several schools of professional teacher education using similar digital badges, and then different schools would compete how many students would reach particular level of accomplishment during the semester. And in the first few years, people took it really seriously. They really felt like in the last final minutes, we need to do more digital badges and reach this many levels. And it was really fun for a few years, but then it felt like it kind of died off. So people weren't that interested in the competition aspect anymore. And that's seems to be something that happens quite often, that people don't really care about the competitive aspect so much. But nevertheless, we still use these digital badges, even though not as much as competition format, but we do have those levels of accomplishment when people reach a certain amount of badges. Many years ago, I started building some lectures into this treasure hunt, or if you do geocaching, similar format, that you kind of look for these clues around the city or around the area. And you, in my game or treasure hunt game, you would find them as a QR code, and it would start the next part of the lecture that would tell you to walk to that place or take a look at this area or take a look at these buildings or areas. So the kind of the visuals of the lecture were the surroundings where you walk from one point to another. And I think these kind of things are, I see these more and more these days, especially with younger students. But for us, the challenge became the winter. Nobody used them in the winter. And obviously, it's location based, and our students can be 300 kilometers away from us. So it was also always for the very limited group of people. So I haven't been updating these treasure hunts in the recent years. I'm sure somewhere there are my QR codes hanging from a telephone pole or lamp post, and people are wondering, why is this still here? But nevertheless, it was good to get people moving and then kind of finding their way to the learning content. Another thing we've been using with teacher students is an online board game as a format of group examination. So we've had group examinations where people are given a few topics they have to discuss, and they have to record their online meeting, and that's kind of their group discussion or group examination answer. And we built an online board game format where they pretty much have to answer same questions, that the format is completely taken from very familiar board games, and people seem to get into this really easily. And we have found out that these are much more interesting and engaging discussions that people would do if we compared to if we only gave them the examination questions. Now there's an element of game, even though it's a simple game, it somehow makes it a little bit more engaging. It feels like adult students are enjoying it more. There's a lot of laughter, and still they're dealing with exactly the same content as they would if it was just a direct question of the examination. Uh, I think three online escape rooms have been presented in a couple of media and learning webinars so far. And these are something that we have provided for our teacher students so that they would use them with their students, whether they teach in whatever field they teach. And sometimes I question whether it's worth its time to build like a 360 environment because the content itself it doesn't really require always 360 content, but with AI, they are fairly simple to create these days. So we've been playing around with them. But I realized that my first escape rooms were too easy to solve. People would often just Google or use use perhaps AI to find the answers to solve the puzzles from the escape room. So this winter, I actually created escape rooms where there was no questions, there was only answers. And with this simple method, we realized that people didn't use AI or Google to solve those escape room puzzles, but they actually started talking about the answer, and they have to figure out what is the question where we have the answer in front of us. And with this tiny change, I realized, okay, now it's actually an immersive experience where people start solving the puzzle together and didn't just do it as a mechanical Google or AI problem solving task. We've also built a couple of very simple jumper games with vibe coding because with the Claude or ChatGPT you can code even if you don't know how to code. So basically telling the AI to create an HTML jumper game where you have to practice the terminology of assessment or pedagogical models or educational science theories, stuff like this. And even though the games are really, really simple, people seem to be playing them. And somehow, even this game where the screen capture is from, you only have to press the space bar to jump and hit the right answer and avoid the wrong answers. And the game is super simple, but because of the repetition, you end up familiarizing yourself with the terminology. And people really want to get high score, even though the score doesn't matter. It's not recorded anywhere, but nevertheless, people try to reach the high score as possible. And at the same time, they end up practicing the terminology. Well, I think these role-playing scenarios were already mentioned. We've also created a few, for example, how to motivate students and how to have a tutoring discussions with students. We've examined a couple of these scenarios. The challenge quite often is the language and communication culture. Some solutions that are already available, they don't necessarily operate according to the Finnish communication culture. So it takes some time to create role-playing scenarios where you actually have it a little bit more realistic. Sometimes we even create AI characters that are really good at doing something so difficult in such a difficult way that teachers cannot, they will never succeed in guiding that particular student, for example, in their studies, because language models are too well trained or too good at avoiding doing that, which is supposed to only make the scenario challenging, but they sometimes make it impossible. And the last few things is we've create again these open world environments that are quite familiar from different kind of online games where you just explore what you find in the world. Even if there's not necessarily a game or gamified experience in these virtual spaces, it's a convention that is quite familiar from many games where you just have to explore the open world and then you find something interesting or you find a clue or you find a task or you find a message. And it's not clearly always defined what you learn from them, but for example, you can have a space online, open world space where you have learning content and people can kind of wander around and find interesting things within itself. So Many of those things we have tried, and we've realized that maybe it's not worth our while. And some of those things we feel like there should be much more of these. But I can tell for sure that based on the feedback that we have collected from adult students, I very rarely hear from students from who are studying online that we don't like playing here, which is instantly positive feedback for me. That's something that I felt that has been a bit of a struggle, that how do I have these adult students playing? They realize right away that this is enriching the online learning experience. And I have not had a single negative feedback that we have tried to gamify or make the online learning experience more playful. Yeah, I think this is where I stop. Thanks.
Thank you, Yanni. That's great. Very exciting. Interested in some of those experiences. Appreciate that. All right, great. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat and we will get to them shortly. But one more presentation from Julian van der Kratz from Leiden University.
Hi, everybody. Greetings from the Netherlands. Sorry for my thick Dutch accent. I'll be showing some practical stuff and referring to some of the theory that Ivan and Jana also mentioned. I'm a product owner, which means I work for IT and I try to help to add value in education. So again, the stuff I'll be showing is very practical. And let me share my screen here. I don't have a presentation. I just want to share what we're doing. Yeah. I also want to share sound. Okay. Yes. Share. Yeah. Sharing is caring. There we go. We have a platform called Luca, which is actually a copy of a platform called Cogniti, which was made by Sydney University, as you can see down here at the bottom. I'll quickly show you the website because it's very interesting. If you want to know more, go to this website, cogniti.ai. We copied their code and rebranded it. And this is a platform for AI in education. Let me log in here. And one of the things you can do with it, the primary function is to create chatbots for your specific learning goals. And that's there you see right away the big difference with generic tools like NotebookLM or generic chatbots. This is really meant to create chatbots for specific learning goals for specific courses. And you can do that using templates, and there are some very obvious templates here, like these tutoring bots. But what we're here for today is this role-playing agent or client conversation simulator template. And this platform allows you to quickly get started with a template like this. It's a prompt, as you see, and at the right you'll get an agent that will actually help you to create the agent for you, so you don't have to be an expert in prompting to create your first bot. And then you can create, these simulations where AI will role play and the student will also role play. And referring to what Ivan said and also to what Janne said about the Homo Ludens, in this way you can create a safe playground in which students can practice skills. And that's very important for us, where Leiden University is a university and not one for applied sciences. So we're very focused on the transfer of knowledge and not so much on skills. Skills meaning knowing when, why, and how to apply your knowledge. And this platform actually gave us an opportunity to do more with skills in a playful way. For example, I have a bot here in the apotheek, which means in the pharmacy. We create that for the, well, obviously pharmacy. And this bot, it simulates a disgruntled senior citizen who's coming to collect their medicines that are not there. Good luck with that. And of course, you can learn in the books that you have to handle this empathically. But it's quite another thing to actually do that. And in this simple way, just by typing and chatting, students can practice that. So the senior citizen says they come to collect their medicine. I'm going to have to disappoint them. Unfortunately, I'm sorry. I'm sorry, sir. Your medicine is not here. Let's see if they take that like a sport. They don't. How can that be? I'm quite startled, he says, etc. And you quickly forget as a student that you're in a scenario, you forget that you're typing, and people can get really serious in games. That's an interesting contradiction there. Of course, this is a little bit funny, but there's more serious stuff we're doing with this. For example, let me see. Yeah, the patient simulator right here. This is a bot that we created for a master of clinical psychology. And this bot actually simulates a severely depressed patient. And one of the learning goals for the students is to assess the severity of the suicide risk, which is a very, very serious thing to be handling. And this bot does so very well. Of course, we have these self-harm filters in our environment, which we had to turn all the way down in order for this bot to keep responding. But it's an extremely valuable thing to do. So even with simple chatbots, gamification in the sense of creating a scenario in which people must role play can be very worthwhile. And we're also thinking about use cases where students will get feedback from actors in the role that they're actually playing. So you can imagine that if you're in a scenario, for example, a medical scenario, and you have to deal with a nurse and a patient and a senior doctor, then these actors, they will give feedback differently depending on their role, and also different than from the teacher themselves, who has a more high over point of view. So that can be very interesting. Then another part of functionality that's in this platform is interactive mini apps. And this allows teachers and teacher support staff to actually create interactive applications that may also contain AI within the platform. And then they're hosted safely within the platform. So it's actually a working vibe coding pipeline, so to speak. And this is an example of a card sorting app. Card sorting is, of course, a gamified way of teaching, of helping students to get to terms with higher abstraction, higher abstraction of the stuff that they're working with by grouping things into categories, and categories will, of course, be these higher categories that organize stuff. So this is a simple interactive application that was created by somebody. This is another chat with philosophers. You can chat with philosophers, obviously. There's AI in here, but you can also have them battle each other until the death, and then they'll react to each other. And the platform allows for you to create and edit these apps just by talking, by saying in natural language what you would like and what you would like to have changed. You can also put telemetry in there so you can later see how the students used these apps. So what the most important thing is about this platform is that it makes it very easy to get started with gamification. Then there's another app. It's called Lula. We built this from scratch. It's an application to learn spoken languages by scenarios. We noticed that in language learning books, they're often structured in scenarios like, the bakery, and then all the words that are associated with that. So we created an app with those scenarios, and and they follow the courses that are in the book. I'll show you a quick example in English, probably easy. Hello, hello.
Hello. Good morning. What would you like for breakfast today?
Ooh, I would like a Long Island iced tea for breakfast, please.
Oh, that drink is usually not for breakfast. How about something else? Maybe tea,
Sorry,
coffee?
maar dit gaat veel te snel. Kan je ietsje langzamer praten, alsjeblieft?
Sure, no problem. I will speak slowly. Let's try again.
So the technology works really well, and there's more classical kinds of gamification in here because you can get awards for words that you use. There's an end condition that you can define, and if you get to the end condition, for example, that you actually order breakfast without an alcoholic drink and manage to pay for it without, making a mess of yourself, then the simulation is finished. So that's more like classical gamification with rewards. You can create the scenarios with AI or yourselves, and there's a list of keywords that you can also create. That there's transcription in the background, and then scoring of the words that you hit. And then lastly, we sometimes experiment with crazy stuff like this. This is an old school text adventure. I don't know if anybody in this room is old enough to have played text adventures in their time. I have anyway. I see Janne, nodding yes. Text adventures are adventures where you have to type to navigate. So you type like look around, and then you see a shiny gem. You get as a response, and then you say take the gem, etc. So we created this text adventure to learn Japanese etiquette. So you're placed in a scenario, Neo Tokyo, a fortress of etiquette and steel, and you have to navigate that scenario by being super polite. And you get an AI assistant that helps you now and then if you're not polite enough. So if I say, I'm at the ramen stand right now, can I have some ramen, please? Sounds, good enough to me. However, if it would respond yes, that's, I don't get any ramen, and my digital assistant tries to help me by saying that I first have to say sumimasen, 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 sumimasen. Right. And there's points. You see, I got 10 extra face points for doing this well. You can lose face points if you're not polite enough. And there are certain stages in the game where you can get a full face bar. For example, if you actually order the ramen and eat it, then I get a full recharge. We designed this game, we vibe coded it in a way that there's a dungeon master in here with a system prompt that's in a separate file. And the system prompt describes how the dungeon master should guide the player and the game, but how it should also guide the educational aspect of it. So that's like a basic architecture of games we want to create in the future, where we have this dungeon master that controls the game and the educational aspect. Students find this a lot of fun. So this is with a fun aspect in it, and it was also a lot of fun to make. That's what I wanted to show you today. So thanks for your attention, and yeah, if there's any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Thank you, Julian. Very interesting, very exciting. I had seen Cogniti before, but not like that. So I have lots of questions. Well, great. If you have questions, please drop them in the chat. I see a few have been coming along here. We'll go back to the top. So there was a question. Not all students are as receptive to gamification as others. How do you access their will to participate, or what strategies do you recommend to someone who is starting to implement gamification in their lessons? And this could be open for anybody, but perhaps Ivan, I think it was when you were talking.
Perhaps
Yeah.
Perhaps I can start. Well, I mean, at least with my students, it's rarely their only option. They always have different paths, but we recommend that, especially because they are becoming teachers, they should learn versatile ways of teaching different things. And for example, the role playing scenarios with AI characters seem to be much more accessible compared to, for example, if we try to plan a role playing scenario where participants would play the roles. So at least compared to that, those AI character role playing scenarios are much more accessible compared to the fact that, okay, everybody has to learn a role and then play that. But at least I wouldn't want to say that middle-aged adult males from the engineering background, but unfortunately, that's what I would say, that those people can be somewhat challenging sometimes to get their inner gamer to show themselves.
Oh, that's great. I think Sandra's question might have been asked, but similar. So what would you say, how do you decide when to use gamification to meet your planned expectation? How do you decide when to use
Yeah, well, it's basically
gamification elements? Yeah.
Ivan could answer this because he already did it in his presentation, but I'll say it for you maybe. It all starts with the learning goal. And we always start any project we do with the learning goals, and then we ask ourselves, can AI or gamification play a role here? And if there's a way to do it without AI and without computers, that's always preferable. But yeah, basically that, and you brainstorm with an educational expert and with the teacher about how we could support the learning goals and not interfere with them. That's basically it for us.
Yeah. I would completely agree that you always need to have a solid foundation, pedagogical arguments. Why are we doing it this way? So it can't be just silly nonsense or like I do it because I had fun when I did it. That's not a good argument. You need to have pedagogical arguments of why we are doing something in a particular way.
We also use the classical strategy of we have something in our day by day as teachers or in our lessons that it's already a game or something that is easy to transform, no, to a gamified way. If the question is yes, maybe we can start looking for how we can start in the gamification with AI or with technology. Sometimes I have some difficult parts that cannot be being gamified. I don't know, when I'm doing the part of theoretical formulas of cognition, how I'm going to gamify that, it's quite difficult. When I'm working with patients or with athletes, well, maybe better than being in a lab and imagine everything, maybe we can gamify something. So this is a way of arriving to the planet expectations.
And I think we really do have the advantage of surprise at the moment because we have so many students who kind of know the routine of online education. They know what to expect and they kind of know the routine, and unfortunately they know the boring routine. So if we can subvert those expectations and provide something a little bit something different, I think most of the time we have really positive reaction that, oh, it wasn't that talking head and PowerPoint lecture and breakout discussion in the end, but we actually created something different they hadn't experienced before.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I would like just to add that we also, when we're planning gamification programs, and we also think about the the differences we have from our students. We have people who is more extrovert, so they prefer to speak. We have more introverts, so they prefer to write. So we usually have different gamification level of activities, so everyone can feel comfortable. So you don't feel it's mandatory for me to make a gamified ultra experience that I have to be ultra extrovert talking, or with maybe we can use an AI or a bot to find, not to make some solutions. So we divide different roles on the teams, usually work on teams, so it's easier for us, because if we started like one way of gamify one activity, and we have this problem that, wow, I have some people who is not getting fun of gamifying, this activity. So why? maybe for the individual differences. So let's gonna try to make different ways of achieving the goal. So, well, this is also a counsel from all the mistakes we have done, because this they come from all the different mistakes.
Great. I think this one might be for Julian. With Luca/Cogniti, would students access the app link to gain access to the chatbot, or can the bot be shared in a link?
Sure, yeah, that's all possible. We usually share it through Brightspace, or that's our digital learning environment. Canvas is another big one that it works with, and it can be shared on, yeah, yeah. And yeah, the teacher and the teacher support staff are actually responsible. We try to keep the teacher support staff that we have per faculty as gatekeepers for everything that happens on the platform.
When it comes to escape rooms, I worry that the excitement of the game eclipses the content when students are asked to recall learned or reviewed concepts a few days later. In our experience, the students tend to remember the lock they opened more than the knowledge or learning that allowed them to open the lock. Any design suggestions to better balance the knowledge/learning with the thrill? Nevertheless, students love escape rooms and cite them as their favorite part in our teaching evaluations. Yana, you had thoughts.
Yeah, at least I can say based on the experience we've had these past semesters that we didn't start with the game, and a lot of the adult students did not get out of the escape room one. They never made it to the room two, or even let alone room three. So I think we had like 15 tasks, and they never got through more than first three. So obviously that wasn't the first method to learn the content. We did have those boring webinars and reading materials that were given a couple of weeks before, but we told that we will deal with these materials later on. We just didn't tell them how. So the answers that were in the escape room were from the material from 2 weeks before that were a webinar on material. So the escape room was kind of the review and a reflection part of the content. So it wasn't the primary source of information. It was just test that do you actually remember or understand what was the webinar 2 weeks ago about, and did you actually read the articles that were shared to you 2 weeks ago? So I think in that sense, the escape room works much better if that's not the primary experience with the learning content.
Yeah, I would like to add that we also have the experience, no? Completely agree that for solving that escape room, you need some keys that are part of other days of teaching, more formal teaching. So it's quite difficult to survive, if you want to say this word, no, to survive on the escape room without coming to the classical lessons or the classical lectures or coming to some days of the lab. So it's perfect. You come to the escape room, but if you are just coming here to get fun or to play the game, or you just come the day of the funny day, you are not going to get a lot of fun because maybe you don't pass the first level of the escape room, and you are so at least this is a way we also motivate them to come from 8 a.m. lectures. Maybe on Monday escape room you will need some of the information we are giving you on that 8 a.m. of the morning. So this is also a technique we use.
Great. Just keep an eye on time. Regarding Luca Cogniti, can it be accessed on a smartphone? And are the teachers responsible for all the content used
Yeah, I kind
and
of answered that
configuring
already.
all
I
that?
think it's the teacher support staff who are in the end responsible gatekeepers, and yeah, I do think it works on a smartphone.
I have a general question for all. Assessment has become a challenging topic during the times of AI. Do you see a way to use gamification within assessment processes to help address this challenge for teachers? Do you have any
Well,
experience?
for example, our online board game as a group examination was done instead of 100 and something students writing individual essays about the same topic. So instead of that, we wanted to have them discussing the same topics that they would have to write essays about. So I think in this sense, them playing this social board game with each others and discussing the topics based on their own professional background, I think I received so much more interesting answers to these questions, and my assessment even the whole assessment process was so much more interesting because I heard them discussing based on their own professional backgrounds regarding the same topic. So at least if they take the game seriously enough and engage the discussion with the other players, at least in this scenario, it made the assessment process much more fun and more engaging and hopefully more helpful for the learning process. I didn't have to worry too much about the use of AI in that case.
I would like to add that in general, scenario-based, role-based testing allows for more holistic ways of testing, and I do think that people that failure to understand the core concepts of something will emerge much quicker in those types of assessments. How to implement that, that's a whole other question, but I do think that there's lots of value in these types of assessments.
Yeah. And if you're really immersed in the learning situation, you don't, get out of it and start using generative AI to complete the task. If you're really immersed in the role play or game or virtual environment or whatever, if you're really able to create that sort of situation, people aren't going to drift away from that situation to discuss with the AI.
Yeah, from our experience, we are trying to assess with gamification, but it's quite complicated. For us, it's the level 4. I talked about the interactive part. It's about this interaction that is enough realistic or enough powerful so we can make a mark about this interaction. Right now, we are more in the just changing opinions, making some role play, but we are more classical. Maybe this is a different university cultures. We are more classical. So about this part of IE and making assessments, it's quite complicated right now. We are more in conservative right now.
That's great. Julian, I have follow-up questions about how you got Cogniti like under your branding and name, if it was open sourced or if it was partnership, because everything I've seen looks like it's using their platform. And do you have to have all your own LLM like keys and access to your own models and tokens, or is it using local models running on some hardware?
Anything you please is the short answer. So
Okay.
it's very flexible. We license it under open source license. There's also a more commercial version available now that takes less energy or less. It's easier to implement.
Okay.
We implemented ourselves, rebranded it, took about 3 days.
Okay.
And you can use any AI that you want anywhere.
Okay. So just it connects to whatever models you have in model gateway. Okay. I will be very curious in looking into that. Um, well, if there are no more questions, I don't see any more in the chat. I really appreciate all your presentations, everyone's time for showing up today. These recordings and presentations will be uploaded to the event page within the next week. We'll have some upcoming events. Yeah, there we go. And the result, oh yeah, we had results of the survey first. It's a little.
Yes, so I wanted to
Zoom in.
show you, share
Yeah.
the result of this poll in the beginning of the session, which are quite interesting. So the majority of our participants were teaching staff or learning technologists. We had quite some interesting answers here about how has AI affected your gamification. Some people said that it actually affected. And here we can see that few people said that they like to use gamification in their teaching practice, but they don't know how. So I hope that by the end of this session, you had some ideas how to do this. And I would also like to share with you that our upcoming conference is very close. You can still register for the conference and join us for a very vibrant community. You see and you hear a lot more about similar topics and much more. And if you're interested to join more activities within our special interest group, you can become a member. And if you do so before the conference, you'll get a discount also for the pass. Thank you so much for joining us.